I never thought I'd end up running an antique shop on an alien world, much less one buried in the depths of a space station that smelled perpetually of fried engine grease and spilled coolant. But here I was, standing behind the counter of a dusty shop filled with the relics of 100 forgotten civilizations, staring at the flickering neon sign outside my door that read, Bailey's Galactic Curiosities. My name's Eli Bailey, former cargo hauler, occasional scrap dealer, and now, by a stroke of bad luck or cosmic irony, the owner of a store filled with artifacts I barely understood. It had been a reckless purchase, made in the heat of desperation after my last ship, the Wandering Star, suffered a catastrophic engine failure that left me stranded on Keltra Station with just enough credits to either buy a one-way shuttle ticket home or invest in something that might keep me fed. I chose the latter. I didn't know much about antiques, but I knew how to haggle. And I figured that even if I couldn't tell a Zernian prayer stone from a Grith War relic, there were enough collectors and traders drifting through this part of the galaxy to keep the business afloat. At least, that had been the idea. Reality, however, was far less promising. My first week in business had been slow, with only a handful of customers stopping in, most of them more interested in browsing than buying. The few sales I made barely covered station rent. And worse yet, the previous owner hadn't exactly left me with a neat catalog of inventory. Half the shop stock was unmarked, unidentified, or downright questionable in origin. Still, I wasn't about to give up. Humans were nothing if not adaptable, and I had every intention of turning this place into something worth my time. Then on the 9th day, my first real customer walked in, and he was a dragon. Not the fire-breathing, fairy tale kind. No, this one was alien, an 8-foot-tall, winged reptilian with obsidian black scales and a pair of piercing golden eyes that swept across the shop with practiced precision. His presence alone was enough to make the tiny brass bell above the door seem absurdly inadequate. Keltra Station was home to a diverse crowd, but even among the strange and the exotic, this particular visitor stood out. His species, Dracari, if I wasn't mistaken, were rare this deep into human space. They were warriors, mercenaries, and sometimes traders, but they didn't usually have much interest in human-owned businesses unless they had a specific reason. The Dracari stepped forward, his claws clicking lightly against the metal flooring. He wore a dark, military-style coat that did little to hide the power beneath his scaled frame. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, measured, and carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. "You are the proprietor of this establishment?" I nodded. "That's me, Eli Bailey. Welcome to Bailey's Galactic Curiosities." He regarded me for a moment, then swept his gaze over the shelves filled with trinkets, relics, and assorted oddities. "I seek something specific." "All right," I said, trying to sound confident. "What exactly are you looking for?" The Dracari turned to me, his golden eyes narrowing slightly. "A key." I blinked. "A key. A very old key. One that was sold to this shop many years ago." That was a problem. The shop's inventory, or lack thereof, meant I had no way of verifying whether such an item had ever passed through my hands. But I wasn't about to admit that just yet. "Well," I said, stalling, "we have all sorts of ancient artifacts. Do you have any more details?" The Dracari hesitated, then reached into his coat, pulling out a small holographic device. With a tap of his claw, a three-dimensional image flickered to life between us. A simple metal key, old and worn, its surface engraved with unfamiliar symbols. I stared at it, feeling an odd chill run down my spine. Something about that key looked important and dangerous. I had no idea where it was, but I had the distinct feeling that finding it would change everything. Before I could speak, the Dracari leaned in slightly, his gaze intense. "This key unlocks something very old, something lost." He paused, then added, "If you find it, I will pay handsomely." That got my attention. "How handsomely?" I asked, keeping my voice even. The Dracari's lip curled slightly, revealing sharp teeth. "Enough to make you a very wealthy man." I exhaled slowly, my mind already racing. There were 100 reasons to say no, to walk away from whatever trouble this key might bring. But humans weren't exactly known for backing down from a challenge. And if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I wasn't about to let my first real customer walk away empty-handed, even if it meant getting myself into more trouble than I'd ever bargained for. The bell above the door chimed again, its cheerful jingle an odd contrast to the massive, scaled figure that had just ducked through the entrance. I swallowed hard. Drakari, a real, living Drakari, was standing in my shop, the kind of alien you usually only heard of molten gold glowing faintly along the ridges of his body, the dragon-like being surveyed my store with piercing amber eyes. I kept my posture neutral, despite the rapid beat of my heart. "Welcome to Eli's Emporium," I said, forcing my voice into a calm rhythm. "Can I help you find something?" The Drakari exhaled a slow, measured breath. Heat rippled in the air around him. "Human," he rumbled, voice like a distant thunderstorm. "I seek an artifact. A key. I was told it lies within these walls." A key? My mind raced, flipping through mental images of the cluttered inventory. I had acquired this shop only a few weeks ago, and I was still uncovering half of what lay hidden in the back rooms. "Could you describe it?" I asked, buying time. The Drakari's eyes narrowed slightly, considering. "It is ancient, older than your species' recorded history. Small, made of a metal not found in this system. It carries the scent of starfire and the weight of oaths unbroken." A poetic way to describe it, but not particularly helpful. I gestured toward the deeper part of the shop. "I have a storage room in the back with some older, unclassified items. If it's here, that might be the best place to check." The Drakari nodded once, stepping further inside. The floor creaked beneath his weight, and I led him toward the back where shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten artifacts, dust-covered relics, and a few things I hadn't dared touch yet. I pulled a small lamp down, illuminating a locked case on the shelf. "This is where I keep anything that seems significant but hasn't been identified yet. You're welcome to take a look." The Drakari stepped forward, his clawed hand hovering over the glass. For a moment, the air thickened, and a hum resonated deep within the shop, like something responding to his presence. Then his eyes locked onto a small, seemingly insignificant piece of metal tucked between two carved stone idols. "There," he said, his voice quieter but no less intense. "That is the key." I frowned, pulling the case open carefully. The key in question was no bigger than my palm, made of some dark alloy that shimmered faintly under the light. I had thought it was just an old trinket, maybe a ceremonial piece. Nothing about it suggested it was valuable, let alone capable of drawing a Drakari into my shop. "You're certain?" I asked, turning it over in my hand. The Drakari's gaze was unwavering. "It belongs to my people, and it must be returned." I hesitated. If it's that important, why was it left here? Who sold it to the shop before I bought it? The Drakari's jaw tightened. "That is unknown to me," which meant it was either lost, stolen, or intentionally hidden. None of those options sat well with me. "Look," I said, "I don't mind selling it to you, but I'd like to know what it does first. I don't deal in dangerous artifacts without some kind of warning." The air between us grew heavy. For a moment, I thought the Drakari might refuse to answer. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "It is a key to something buried, something powerful, and it is waking up." A chill ran down my spine. "Waking up? You mean it's alive?" In a manner of speaking. His gaze flicked to the key again, then back to me. "I did not expect you to understand, but I must have it. The consequences of failure are unacceptable." I studied the artifact, the way it seemed to pulse faintly in my palm. If this thing was waking up, I had a feeling my involvement in this wasn't over yet. And somehow, I knew that giving it up might be the biggest mistake of my life. "Before I agree to anything," I said slowly, "I need you to tell me exactly what this key unlocks." The Drakari's eyes burned with something unreadable. "Then prepare yourself, human. The truth is not gentle." The room dimmed, as if the weight of the universe itself had leaned in closer. And the Drakari began to speak, out in war stories or high-stakes political disputes. Towering, draped in obsidian black scales with streaks. The dragon's golden eyes locked onto me as the air in the antique shop grew thick with tension. I could still hear the low hum of the glowing artifact he had placed on the counter, a strange, metallic sphere covered in delicate etchings that pulsed with an eerie blue light. I swallowed hard. So, what exactly is this thing? The dragon exhaled a slow breath, the heat from his nostrils causing a few loose papers on the counter to flutter. You do not recognize it, human? I glanced at the artifact again. My fingers tingled just from being near it. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just some old relic. The dragon's deep voice rumbled. This is a celestial core, a fragment of a lost empire that predates most of the civilizations you know. It holds knowledge, power, and something far more dangerous. I took a careful step back. Dangerous how? His eyes narrowed. That depends on who wields it. That was when the shop's old door creaked open again. A gust of cold air rushed in, and I turned to see a trio of figures stepping inside. They weren't customers. The tallest among them, an alien with sharp, insectoid limbs and gleaming black eyes, clicked its mandibles. Human. Hand over the artifact. The dragon shifted, his massive form tensing like a coiled spring. You dare enter here uninvited? The lead alien hissed, and the two others, smaller, but just as menacing, produced sleek, pulsating weapons. That object belongs to the Syndicate. You will surrender it now, or we will take it by force. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. The Syndicate. The name alone sent shivers down my spine. They were a ruthless, galaxy-spanning organization that dealt in black market goods, mercenary work, and worse. Listen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just run an antique shop. I don't know what this thing is, and frankly, I don't want any trouble. One of the aliens took a step closer. You already have trouble, human. I barely had time to react before the dragon moved. His massive clawed hand slammed into the counter, and the entire room shook. You have made a mistake coming here, he growled. The lead alien raised its weapon. And you have made a mistake thinking we fear you, beast. The moment those words left its mandibles, the dragon let out a roar that rattled the walls. In an instant, he lunged. The shop exploded into chaos. I dove behind the counter as a blast of energy streaked past my head, shattering one of the antique shelves into splinters. The dragon moved like lightning, his claws flashing as he tore through the first attacker, sending it crashing into a stack of crates. One of the others fired at him, but the blast barely singed his scales. With a snarl, he lashed out with his tail, sending the alien flying backward. The leader, however, wasn't so easily taken down. It raised a hand, and a pulse of energy erupted from a small device strapped to its wrist. The dragon recoiled, growling in pain as his body stiffened. Paralysis tech. I acted on instinct. My hand shot toward the artifact on the counter, and the moment my fingers brushed its surface, a shockwave pulsed through my arm. My vision blurred, my thoughts tangled with something vast and incomprehensible. And then, just as suddenly, it all snapped into focus. The dragon was struggling, his muscles locked as the alien advanced. I didn't think, I just reacted. The artifact pulsed in my grip, and without knowing how, I willed it to do something, anything. A surge of energy exploded outward. The alien barely had time to shriek before it was thrown backward, crashing into the wall with enough force to leave a dent. The dragon gasped, suddenly freed from the paralysis. He turned his golden gaze to me, his expression unreadable. The artifact hummed in my hands. I could feel its power, its ancient knowledge pressing against my mind. The dragon finally spoke, his voice quieter this time. You are connected to it now. I swallowed. Yeah, I noticed. Outside, the distant sound of sirens wailed through the city streets. The Syndicate would send more. This wasn't over. I looked up at the dragon. I think I just got myself into something way bigger than I expected. His lips curled into a knowing smile. Welcome to the game, human. I barely had time to process what had happened before the dragon moved. His massive form twisted as he turned toward the wreckage of my shop, golden eyes narrowing at the unconscious Syndicate enforcer slumped against the wall. You just linked with an artifact of the Celestial Empire, he rumbled, his voice both awed and cautious. That is no small thing, human. I gripped the artifact tighter, its surface still warm against my skin. I could feel something inside it, like a low hum in my mind, pulsing with awareness. My head was spinning. Yeah? Well, it sure didn't come with a manual. The dragon's lips curled into something resembling a grin. That's because it chooses its wielder. I barely had time to ask what that meant before the shop's door was suddenly blown off its hinges. A thunderous explosion sent shards of metal and wood flying, and I barely managed to dive behind the counter before another barrage of blaster fire erupted through the smoke. More syndicate goons, and they weren't messing around this time. The dragon moved with impossible speed, his claws flashing as he deflected an energy bolt midair before slamming into one of the attackers with bone-crushing force. I pressed my back against the counter, my heart pounding as I clutched the artifact. The power inside it was still surging, vibrating through my bones. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had no choice. I had to use it. I focused, reaching into that strange hum in my mind, willing the energy outward. The artifact responded instantly. A pulse of blue light exploded from my hands, a shockwave rippling through the shop and sending the attackers sprawling. The walls trembled, shelves shattered, and every electronic device in the shop flickered out in an instant. The dragon turned, his expression unreadable as he looked at me. "I see," he murmured. "You're not just wielding it. You are syncing with it." I staggered, the sheer force of the energy leaving me dizzy. "That's probably bad, right?" "Bad." He let out a deep, rumbling chuckle. "For them? Very." One of the syndicate enforcers groaned, trying to push himself up. The dragon moved before I could react, his massive foot slamming down onto the alien's chest. "Tell your masters," he growled, lowering his head until his fanged snout was inches from the terrified alien's face, "that this human is under my protection now." The enforcer whimpered, his mandibles clicking frantically. "You don't understand. This isn't just about you. The syndicate wants that artifact because it's a key. It's part of." A sharp crack echoed through the shop. The enforcer gasped, then went limp. I whipped around to see another figure standing in the ruined doorway. A lean, armored figure with a long-barreled plasma rifle still aimed at the enforcer's body. The assassin's face was hidden behind a sleek, featureless helmet. The dragon snarled. "Cowards!" The assassin tilted their head slightly, then spoke in a distorted, almost mechanical voice. "You don't understand what you've taken, human. That artifact is older than your entire species." I tightened my grip. "Yeah? And?" The assassin took a slow step forward. "And it belongs to us." The dragon moved before I could blink. One moment he was standing beside me. The next he was launching himself at the assassin with all the force of a hurricane. But the assassin was just as fast. A flash of energy burst between them as the two clashed, the impact sending shockwaves through what little remained of my shop. I barely had time to dive for cover before the battle erupted into chaos. Claws against steel, energy bolts flashing through the smoke, the dragon's roars shaking the air. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. This was getting out of control. The syndicate wouldn't stop coming, and now there were assassins involved. I had to end this. I looked down at the artifact, its pulsing glow reflecting in my hands. If this thing was as powerful as everyone claimed, then maybe I could use it to turn the tables. I closed my eyes, reaching deeper into the energy within. And the moment I did, I felt something staring back. Not just knowledge, not just power, something alive, something waking up. The moment I reached deeper into the artifact's power, the world around me shifted. Time seemed to slow, sound stretching into an eerie silence. My mind wasn't just brushing against the artifact anymore. I was inside it. Or maybe it was inside me. Flashes of knowledge surged through my thoughts. A long-forgotten war. A dying empire. The last remnants of an ancient civilization. Their final hope stored within this artifact. And now, it had chosen me. I gasped as I snapped back to reality, my body trembling from the sheer force of the connection. The shop was still in ruins, the dragon locked in a deadly battle with the Syndicate's assassin. The assassin moved like a shadow, dodging the dragon's powerful strikes, their rifle shifting into a bladed weapon that clashed against his claws in a storm of sparks. The dragon was strong, but the assassin was fast. Too fast. And I knew, in that instant, that if I didn't act, my first and only customer was going to die. I had no idea what I was doing, but I didn't need to. The artifact guided me. I raised my hand, and the air around me ignited with energy. A shock wave blasted outward, the sheer force knocking the assassin off their feet and sending them skidding across the floor. The dragon turned, golden eyes narrowing as he saw me standing there, my entire body wrapped in the artifact's glow. The assassin recovered quickly, flipping back onto their feet. Their helmet tilted slightly, analyzing me. Then, in a slow, measured tone, they said, "You don't understand what you've done, human." I tightened my grip on the artifact. "You're the second person to tell me that today, and I'm still waiting for an explanation." The assassin hesitated, as if debating whether to speak. Then they finally said, "That artifact isn't just a weapon. It's a beacon." The dragon tensed. A beacon to what? The assassin's helmeted gaze shifted toward him. Not what? Who? At that moment, a deep rumble filled the air. Not from the dragon. Not from the ruined shop. From above. I barely had time to react before the ceiling was ripped apart by an invisible force. A massive, looming shadow descended, blotting out the artificial light of the city skyline. A ship. No, something bigger. Older. A construct of black stone and metal. Its surface etched with glowing symbols that pulsed in sync with the artifact in my hands. The assassin took a slow step back. Even they hadn't expected this. The dragon let out a low growl. "Human," he rumbled, "I think you've just woken up something ancient." I swallowed hard, the weight of the artifact pressing against my palm. "Yeah," I muttered. "I'm getting that impression." The construct hovered above us, silent and unmoving. Then, without warning, a beam of shimmering light erupted from its core, striking the artifact. The moment the light touched it, I felt my mind shatter. Not in pain. No, this was something else. I saw things. Memories that weren't mine. A people on the brink of extinction, their last hope locked away in relics like this one. A desperate attempt to preserve something, knowledge, power, history, before their enemies erased them from existence. And I saw humanity. No, not just humanity. A connection. Something about us. Something that made us the only species capable of awakening this power. The visions faded as quickly as they came, and I staggered backward, gasping for breath. The assassin was watching me carefully now. "You're linked to it," they said. "That means the others will come." The dragon's eyes darkened. "Others?" The assassin didn't answer. They simply looked up at the looming construct and took another step back. Then, in a blur of motion, they threw down a small device, and in an instant they vanished. Gone. I barely had time to process that before the construct shifted. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, and for the first time, something spoke. Not in words, not in sound, in thought. "Wielder, you have been chosen. The cycle begins again." I felt my breath catch. What cycle? The construct pulsed. The war that never truly ended. The dragon moved beside me, his massive form tense. "Human," he said, his voice softer now, almost cautious. "What exactly did you just awaken?" I looked down at the artifact in my hands, its glow now brighter than ever. And deep in my gut, I knew the answer. Something old, something powerful, something that had been waiting for humanity. I exhaled sharply. I said, "We just became part of something much, much bigger." The construct pulsed again. "The enemy will come." And as I looked up at the massive, ancient ship hanging above my ruined shop, I realized something chilling. The Syndicate wasn't a real threat. This was just the beginning. The construct hovered above the ruins of my shop, pulsing with unreadable intent. My hands trembled as I clutched the artifact, its warmth seeping into my skin like a second heartbeat. The dragon stood beside me, his golden eyes locked onto the floating behemoth above. "You felt it too, didn't you?" he murmured. I swallowed. Yeah, this wasn't just an ancient relic. It wasn't just some forgotten artifact of a lost civilization. It was a signal, a call to something vast, something that had been waiting. And I had answered. A deep hum vibrated through my bones as the construct spoke again. The enemy will come. The cycle begins again. I exhaled, forcing my racing thoughts into some semblance of order. Who? I demanded. Who's coming? The construct pulsed, but it was the dragon who answered. The ones who ended them, he said darkly. The ones who thought they erased this power from the universe. If they know the artifact has awakened, he trailed off, his claws flexing. They'll come to finish what they started. I finished for him. The realization sank in like a weight pressing down on my chest. I had thought I was just buying an old antique shop. I had thought my biggest problem would be dealing with the dragon's impossible request. Instead, I had reignited a war that had been waiting for the right fool to come along and open the door. I turned to the dragon. What do we do? He let out a slow breath. You tell me, human. This power, this history, it's chosen you. I can fight, I can protect, but only you can decide what happens next. I wanted to laugh. Me, a shopkeeper, deciding the fate of something ancient and terrible? But I couldn't laugh, because I knew he was right. The construct pulsed again. Wielder, you must choose. Will you stand against the dark, or will you run? I thought of the syndicate, of the assassin who had disappeared the moment they realized what I had, of the way they had spoken, not with fear, but with understanding. They knew. They had always known. The dragon watched me carefully, waiting, and then I made my decision. I took a slow step forward, lifting the artifact high. I don't know who you are, I said to the construct. I don't know what this war was, or who started it. But I do know one thing. The energy in the air crackled. If someone's coming to take this power, I continued, my voice steady now, then they're going to have to go through me first. A deep resonance filled the sky. The construct pulsed once more. And then, slowly it began to change. Stone and metal shifted, plates unfolding like the petals of some enormous, ancient flower. Beneath the surface, something shone, something brilliant, something alive. A ship. No, a fleet. The air around me vibrated as the ancient vessels hidden within the construct's shell began to emerge, one by one, their forms sleek and angular, their surfaces pulsing with the same energy as the artifact. The dragon's jaw tightened. That, he muttered, is a declaration. I smiled grimly. Yeah, I agreed. I think it is. Far above, beyond the city skyline, a new light flickered in the darkness. Distant stars blinked. No, not stars. Ships. Hundreds of them. They had heard the call, and now they were coming. The dragon flexed his claws. I hope you know what you're doing, human. I exhaled, my grip tightening on the artifact. I don't, I admitted, but I guess we're about to find out. And as the sky filled with the echoes of an ancient war reigniting, one thought pulsed through my mind. I had only wanted to run an antique shop, but now I was something else. The universe had forgotten humanity. Now, it was about to remember. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell, but one phrase remained whispered among the stars, words spoken in defiance, in hope, in unbreakable will. Human, don't stop.